welcome on the podcast.
Thank you.
Greg.
Good to be
Happy
here.
to have you here. Thank you for flying in from Cape Town. So let me begin by understanding what about the collaboration between you, Stefan, and Philip.
It's been a very organic process. We all, it was effectively the first thing that Stefan did. It was the first thing that I did. And it was the first thing that Philip did. So we started out in our 20s. Small practice in Cape Town, right in the deep end. It's grown into a lot more, obviously, and sometimes that feels quite surreal, given that I think for a few years we were just trying to keep our heads above water, in a small practice.
So you guys were in the same place where you were trained for?
Stefan studied at UCT, which is the University of Cape Town. And is a little bit ahead of Philip and I. Philip and I both studied in Durban. And at that time, it was around 94 when the changes had started to happen in South Africa. And Durban was just quiet, So I started looking for something else and then decided that Cape Town sounded good. And Cape Town was really booming. The world had rediscovered it. It's an extraordinary place. And 2 years later, I think a year after I started, Philip came down, wrapped up in Durban, and came and joined us.
Okay. Now for the audience, we're here with Greg, founder, one of the founders for SAOTA, architects from South Africa. As a co-founder, was there any particular pivotal movement that in SAOTA's early years that tested your vision and ultimately redefined how you approach architecture?
That's a good question. Looking back, it still feels like it was quite organic. We were based in an extraordinary city with extraordinary sites, mountain sites, often facing the sea, with clients who come to Cape Town because they wanted to do something special. So it's an unusual mix of things. I think we organically learnt a lot of lessons about how people live, how to make a better connection to nature, how to work with steep sites, by trial and error in Cape Town. They kind of, in a way, a lot of the pivotal stuff that kind of ultimately put us on this path that we're on were around technology, I think, The internet. We made a decision early on to go with Revit, so BIM modeling. So there was kind of some foundational stuff there. And we also learned early on about systems. I think at the beginning it was a struggle trying to stay organized. So building systems became, that actually was the critical thing. I think if there was a pivotal moment, it was probably getting into trouble because we couldn't find something we should have filed properly. Yeah, it sounds very basic, but building no, it
is. But I get, as a founder, I get a sort of sense when you say systems and how important they are. But from an architectural firm point of view, when you say systems, can you break it down a little bit early on? What are these things that help you pivot?
It was mundane things, proper filing systems, proper work processes. All of those things allowed us then to scale at some point, And I think one of the things that's made us successful is because we have the resources and infrastructure that allow us then to focus on design and delivering design. But again, that it felt accidental at the time, and then it kind of coalesced and it got more direction over time.
Lovely. The South African heritage, what sort of influence that it has had on yours as well as the firm's design philosophy?
So South African heritage, you can unpack that question in different ways. There's a South African architects adopted modernism very early on. So there's a tradition of modernist buildings. One of the other things that happened is, if you look at it the way people live historically, they build. The idea of a house, an enclosure with a hearth in the middle of it, is a very traditional model. You know, the hearth gives you warmth and you can cook on it, and the building's envelope gives you shelter. In South Africa, we have an amazing climate, so we, across our many cultures, like to live outside buildings. So the veranda thing, which is the British colonial model, people started to migrate to the perimeter of buildings and live kind of in this semi-indoor, outdoor space. So I think that idea of how you can live in nature, and people really do like to live outdoors, and it's a very deep concept. That kind of came together with modernist ways of building and dealing with space. And so there are a couple of kind of traditions and cultures that came together there. I think those two elements are kind of key ideas that drove what we do.
And have you sort of, like you said, in early 20s, you ventured into the business.
Yeah.
So that's when you started off also the design as a career, right? Like after university.
Yeah.
Like along the way, has anything else appealed to you as much as architecture and design does?
No, not really. It was quite a fortuitous thing. You know, I grew up in farming communities on sugar farms.
As a family, or is it only the okay? So you guys are growing sugarcane.
Yeah, sorry.
You guys are growing sugar.
Both my parents studied agriculture.
Okay.
And worked for estates. Well, as a young kid in Swaziland, which is
I know Swaziland. Yeah. Yes.
And then on the KwaZulu-Natal coast around Durban. So I had no exposure to architecture. You know, I didn't really know much about the concept. So in my final year of school, I was pretty determined that I was going to be an engineer, because that was something I understood. And very late on, I realized that I actually wanted to do something a little bit more creative. So that morphed into architecture, which, as I say, it also felt somewhat accidental. But from my first day in archi school, I just fell in love with it. You know, it's been a wonderful thing for me. I do other things now. My wife and I have a farm in the Karoo, so I've gone back to my kind of roots, and that's been fun. That's got some beautiful old buildings on it that we've restored, and we've built some new buildings. So I suppose that's my past and present coming together.
What are you growing?
Olives.
Okay. I mean, you got a business around it, or is it like a passion?
We've got a small business up and running around it, yeah. So that's been quite exciting for us.
Okay, interesting. So, SAOTA is known for creating seamless indoor-outdoor connections, and it very much reflects on what you pointed out about the South African heritage being an influence with indoor-outdoor connection. Now, can you walk us through how this philosophy has emerged and why has it become a hallmark in projects like the Montauk Beach House that I read about, or the Flanders House? I mean, these are the two examples I'm pointing out of the many projects that I...
Well, it's interesting those two projects you choose, because one's in the US and one is in Belgium. And it's interesting that people take the effort to reach out to us on the southern tip of Africa to design these buildings. And the reason they do it is that I think over time, they collect images or they try and find buildings that resonate with them. And at some point they realize they've got a lot of SAOTA projects in front of them, so they call us. And that's a byproduct of Cape Town in South Africa. You know, the approach to living that we have. We sometimes talk about these ideas of light, space, and life being key, important elements that can form a building. You know, so we have spectacular light in Cape Town. If you've been to it, you'll know that. But a lot of Africa has amazing light. So we like spaces that are infused with light, you know, and you can do that in different ways. You actually don't need a lot of light. You've just got to be able to figure out how to draw the light into a building. The way you put space together is also important. And I think over time we've started to realize that you can use space in an almost theatrical, cinematic way. You know, if you imagine space as a kind of a series of beads on a necklace, you can string space together, different kinds of space, you know, space that might be oppressive or a space that opens up, horizontal space, a vertical space. And you can create an emotional response in somebody, you know, so like a series of wow moments or a series of contemplative spaces. So that's been exciting to kind of understand space and as an opportunity for an emotional response. But space is also something that's quite liquid in a way. You can shape it, so often you'll see in our buildings you might kind of enter into a compressed space, but then that compression releases and the space actually extends out to the horizon. So you get this kind of infinite component on one hand, adjacent to a very kind of small component of space. So those long connections out to the horizon and the sky become very important ways of connecting people to nature. And then, of course, there's life. You know, you live in a building. A building should make your life better. Buildings are places where people's culture is formed by our space. People socialize in space. Families engage with each other in space. A good building and a good set of spaces should literally be a stage to live in, and it should be a positive experience. I think those ideas which are formed in Africa and South Africa are the things that resonate with somebody in the States or in Belgium looking to do a project, because most architects really just kind of solve the programmatic problem. You know, you need 4 bedrooms, you need this, you need that, you need a facade. That's it. Those other elements that are deeply enriching and empowering are often missing. And I think you see it in those buildings as well. You know, they have those qualities, and they're very different climates, but they have that connection to nature, and they're great spaces to live in, hopefully.
Yeah, interesting enough, most of the designers I interact with often refer to the experience to a cinematic experience. It inevitably, happens.
Yeah. I think it's something people have become a lot more conscious of, right? There are a number of themes that people are starting to understand better. And it's a postmodernism thing, I think. You know, postmodernism itself, directly after modernism kind of collapsed, was somewhat ridiculous. You know, these very obvious nods to the past and to architectural language. I think what's emerged from that is a much more complex thing. You know, how can a building tell a story? How can a building elicit an emotional response, etc., etc. So it's an interesting time. I think it's actually quite a positive time for architecture.
No, I believe so.
I think there's some complexities out there and some forces that are difficult to deal with. But on a design level, there's some really, really interesting people out there. A lot of young people doing really cool things as well. Yeah.
In this era of rapid technological advancements, how does SAOTA integrate tools like VR, BIM, Revit, which you mentioned that you adapted early on, into the creative process without losing the human-centered essence? Because clearly from what you define, it's not just about putting up 4 bedrooms, but also, making life easier for people who live in it.
Yeah. We've always embraced technology. The better your tools are, the better the better products, things you can make. VR was a revelation to us because we could get into buildings very early on and models. And one of the things we did, because we're very conscious of trying to connect space, internal space to external space and to views, is we built these massive landscape models. It might be 40 kilometers across, so it's got, you can see mountain ranges, and you can kind of understand that your view, you might think it's there, but it's actually there. So VR was and is very important to us, because we also do a lot of projects remotely. So being able to have very detailed models.
That's interesting. You're saying from start to finish, you manage the project remotely?
More often than not. I mean, for the 2 years of lockdown, it's completely. You get very good surveys done. Listen, you lose things because you can't smell the site, you can't touch it, but at least you could understand the relationships between things, and you could model what the sun was doing, etc. We've embraced AI. I think there's some really interesting tools there. I think if you're not, I do think AI is going to replace a lot of people. If you're designing a 40-story apartment block in Cairo, Lagos, or Mumbai, there's a point you're not going to need a human being to design those buildings. It's a concrete frame, and it'll optimize the plans and give you the best return, etc., etc. So that's coming, and I think that is going to have a profound effect on the way things work. But I think what we do, which is trying to make more of elicit more of a human response, and make these quite subtle connections often between the earth, a person, materials, etc. Maybe AI will battle with that for a while. But it is going to change profoundly. The technology the changes are massive. Not really clear where it's going to end up. But for now, we like tech and we use it as much as we can.
Like you gave the example of designing a building in Mumbai, where AI integration is used more deeper. I mean, it's and you said it's going to replace a lot of the human job, but in the sense, how I understand that is, for things where there are already set methodologies, AI is going to make it faster, while human being can focus more on the creative process and making it useful to a human being understanding what they look. Is that what you mean also?
Yeah, on projects like, let's say, an apartment block where there aren't many ways to do it, efficiently. I think AI will excel at stuff like that. And as it gets more efficient, it will know how to manage procurement and costing. It'll do all of the engineering, all of the specs. So that's going to be. I mean, that's going to take out a whole sector of the industry. It'll be probably replace those people with other people, though. So we were talking about this the other day. I was in China, and we were talking about how the Chinese property market has been so disrupted because it just got too hot. And how much wealth has been generated in property and how China is struggling to realign. But all of these new technologies are going to create a completely new class of very wealthy people. So, you know, that group might struggle, but they're new people who are going to come along and take advantage of this new paradigm, right? And that kind of always happens. You get new technologies, new things are possible, and new things happen.
What in your job that you every day engage with, which part of it gives you the highest stimulant? Is that what you work for? You get stimulated with a certain process, or it can be the design process itself, or once you see how the building comes alive. In that set of things that happen with you from start to finish on a project, what of it heightens your attention the highest, like which gives you the high? Or does it not give you a high? How do you view your job?
There's always something special about seeing a building come out of the ground. And there's always a moment in the genesis of that building where you see something special in it. And that is always a bit of a kick. Yeah, we work hard, so often you're too close to it to see it. But I love everything about it. You know, architecture is about problem solving.
Yeah.
Every project is different. A lot of what we do, you spoke about us being kind of founders or something. Even that making of SAOTA and making systems and work processes, it's all in many ways the same creative thing, you know. So, and you know, looking back at SAOTA, it's an amazing thing to look back at because it seemed so improbable. So you know, there's a lot of pleasure in seeing that. I read an interview once with Tom Main of Morphosis, who spoke about one of the most critical things he felt that they'd done was built their studio into an institution. And, you know, that act of institutionalizing something, you know, creating a culture, creating a way of doing things. I take quite a lot of pride in that. You know, SAOTA hopefully is something that you know, people behind us will take further, and that gives me a lot of pleasure.
And you guys at the leadership also, do you go to universities and teach
more and more? So
nice.
I think as we've got more got a more kind of solid footing, I think there was a point where we realized that the most important thing that we could do was build systems and build a base, build infrastructure. And there was a time almost when you know, we knew we could do better buildings, and but we knew we needed the mechanism to do it. And as that mechanism's got more embedded, we've been able to do better and better work because we've been able then to start to pivot to kind of start talking about what makes a good building, what's important to us, and part of that has been doing more outreach, talking to students. I've got involved. There's a private architecture school that's in its fourth year now in Cape Town, so I'm on the advisory board there. So we're quite involved.
I mean, for me, it feels like over the last 2 years, I've been talking to a lot of designers and architects. I think for most of them, it's a very natural extension to be able to educate the younger ones on the process.
I think we got quite disconnected from that at a point because we were so focused
On the work you're doing,
work,
that phase happens for sure.
But yeah, we've now got actually quite a big outreach group working with universities, mostly in South Africa. We've got a big bursary program. We've probably given out 40 or 50 bursaries now, so we're starting, I think, to make an impact on young architects in South Africa, and that it is important. We're one of the biggest employers as well of our young architects. So it's quite. So there's a lot of influence there because we take on a lot of interns, and we've built. Somebody called it the SAOTA University the other day. But
nice.
It was a joke, but some truth to it. So when these interns come in, we've got all sorts of training programs, so that we get them going properly on Revit. They need to unlearn some things, learn some new things. So hopefully they come out of internships in a much better position than before they started.
Sustainability, what I gather, is at the core of what SAOTA does. What's the most intriguing trade-off you've faced when aiming for an energy-efficient design like your Green Star rated projects?
So a lot of what we do is focused on passive energy usage.
Okay.
So daylighting, managing direct sun, using natural ventilation, and that comes out of in Africa. It's sometimes difficult to get rated because you've got problems with things like procurement. So if you're working in Nigeria, you're going to be bringing stuff in on a ship from Europe because it just doesn't exist in Nigeria. There are no bicycle lanes, so you can't get any credits for having bicycle places to keep bicycles. So our focus has really been on passive systems. Obviously, we use a lot of solar power now, so that energy production has become.
So, on some of your notable collaborations, Meru project won the 2024 World Architectural Festival Award. So, first of all, congratulations on that. What unexpected inspirations from the site's context that led to its innovative design, and how do you see it influencing future houses?
Meru is a great little building. It's on the Kenyan coast, north of Mombasa, which is an area that brings two traditions together. Or you've got the Swahili coast, which historically was part of Oman. It was it was often seen as being Arab rather than being African. But of course, it's very African, and I think what people don't understand often about Africa is how culturally complex and mixed up it actually is. And then you had the traditions of the people of the interior of Kenya. So you had on one hand the Swahili house built of coral, often kind of square shapes with square courtyards. And then you had African traditions around circular structures. So in Meru, those two things kind of come together, and you get this basically this cube that's kind of has a circular courtyard in the middle and is cut away with these circular forms. And those cutouts respond to cultural issues, to climatic issues. And the building is finished with a plaster made from the red earth of the site. So it's very site specific, and there's a kind of context story behind it, and that is what we're trying to do. We're trying to do, on one hand, buildings that are technically excellent, but on the other hand, buildings that and have a certain kind of global quality to them. because that's a reality of the world. You know, wherever you go and see a client, they typically have the same, largely the same expectations about what a building is and what it looks like, and it's quite consistent. But buildings that belong, you know, a building that couldn't exist somewhere else. So it might do all of these things about having somewhat global aesthetics and being technically excellent, but it belongs to the Kenyan coast, or it belongs Montauk in the northeast of the US. And when you look at it, you know it's from there because it tells a story. It says, I'm a citizen of this place. Yeah.
It's like making a movie. I can imagine that you need to be certain of your research to put it out there.
Yeah.
And so you also work on global hospitality projects, Aman Residences, which is my personal favorite in Marrakesh, and Noom Hotel in Abidjan.
Yeah.
Now, how do you adapt SAOTA's signature style to diverse cultural, environmental contexts without diluting it?
I think it's the same kind of answer. You know, it's understanding the context. Culture. So, and on one hand, you've got real things that you're responding to: climate, noise, slope, views. And on the other hand, you've got the peculiarities of a place that may range from cultural issues to kind of food people eat, you know, the way they eat it. I suppose that's cultural as well. And the traditions and stories and craft of a particular place. So again, it's just bringing those things together. So.
Is there any culture that sort of inspired you the most amongst the many that you may come across through your process?
I'm very biased towards a lot of African culture and art. There are extraordinary traditions of art and making in Africa, and there's absolutely extraordinary contemporary art coming out of the continent. So that's very inspiring for me, you know.
What about it? Is it the people, or
I think it's the cultural complexity of Africa, the richness. I think there's a sensibility to the way people relate to each other especially in sub-Saharan Africa. You know, this idea that I exist because you exist, this kind of communality is very important. There's a generosity. There's also very incredibly young, creative population emerging. You know, Africa has about 1 billion people today. It's heading towards about 4 billion. It's going to make a massive impact on the planet. You know, Nigeria's got just over 200 million. By the end of the century, it might have 700 or 800 million people. By that point, that's more than North America and Western Europe put together. And it's a young population.
Yeah.
So Africa feels like stuff's possible. You know, these countries are emerging from actually centuries of difficult times, and so it's an exciting time. And there's a confidence on the continent that's very exciting. I mean, everybody knows that Europe's struggling, for instance, and some of that is because it hasn't got this dynamism powering it. You know, it's stagnant. It needs immigration, but it doesn't want it. It's like, you know.
No, I can relate. It's the same in India as well. There's chaos, but there is motion.
Exactly. Yeah. And there's a long build ahead of you guys. You know, there's lots to do. and people are doing it. It's an exciting time.
We love Africa so much so that most of our careers, me and most of my team as well, we have always done things across Africa, from north to the south.
Yeah.
But post-COVID, we got busy with the Saudi Arabian market. Even now we are.
Yeah.
But we have never been able to let go Africa or us. So, and that's how this arrangement of bringing Africans to Dubai happened. So we feel like I can relate to most of the things that you are saying in terms of the dynamism, in terms of the culture and all. We feel so much at home.
Yeah.
In many parts, especially the South African, the Kenyan.
Well, we have
region.
this shared history as well, which is. I grew up in Swaziland, but then we moved to a town just north of Durban, and Durban's one of the biggest. There's one of the biggest Indian communities outside of India. But the whole east coast of Africa is very inflected by India, right? I grew up in a Catholic family, and the Catholic community that I was in is predominantly Indian because of the people because of the Portuguese in India. So they're interesting connections.
For audience, tell us some interesting facts about Swaziland, because what I know is it's a country within a country.
Yeah, it's bordered by Mozambique and South Africa. It's one of the last true monarchies on the planet. Beautiful countries. It's a small population, just over 1 million now, I think.
You still spend some of the time there?
No, not really. No. It was an amazing place to grow up in. Quite safe. People are very literate, but very proud of their traditions. Anyone who was connected to the royal family would wear a red feather on their head. So you'd see it everywhere. A proud country.
See, one thing with Africa, we feel for us personally is the relaxedness in most of the things. I mean, it can be both good and bad. And for us, we experience something like Saudi, for example. They have vision. Of course, it's totally different culture and all of that taken into consideration. You have a deadline, 2030 is the vision, so decisions happen faster, execution happens faster. On the other hand, here, it's relaxed. You're always, enjoying the whole, for the most part at least. Is it a good thing or a bad thing from an African context? Or do you have anything to tell about what Africa needs to unleash, especially taking youth into consideration, purely from a realistic point of view? I'm not even talking the larger economy.
Africa is a wonderful place to live in with wonderful people. And as you've intimated, people are very engaging and friendly, and you find that across the continent. It's fantastic. And Africans are industrious. You don't you don't go to an African country and find nobody's working. Everybody's hustling. What we have is we have significant political problems, or we've had significant problems with people trying to form functional governments and functional political systems, but I think we're starting to get past that. It's easy to tell a story of a dysfunctional Africa, but if you start scratching and looking closely, what you start to see is civil government that's better structured. Things like taxes are being collected and spent on infrastructure. Countries that are more democratic. Again, I think if you go back in kind of 25-year increments, the change on the continent is extraordinary. You know, and the moment you start going back 50 years and further back, it's completely unrecognizable. Countries have had absolutely extraordinary development. You know, Lagos is extreme, I know, but Lagos had 250,000 people in 1950. It's got 25 million today. Probably going to be the first city to hit 100 million. And it all works. You know, there's infrastructure, the school, people are going to school, people are eating. The whole mechanism works. It doesn't look like a mechanism anywhere else on the planet, perhaps. But it works. So I think that's gathering pace. You know, there are a lot of countries. Zambia's one, Tanzania's another, Kenya, Rwanda. There are a lot of countries that things are happening. It's moving.
I mean, like people I know, I have heard no one who comes out of Africa without an experience. And something always pulls people back.
Yeah.
And I even know when one of our hospitality events that we had focused on Saudi and UAE, somebody talked about how Africa hospitality should not be looking at aping the West, but rather focus on what has always been, which is localizing the culture. Because I would come to Kenya to experience the Kenyan culture, and not to be in a boxed up room like the West is.
Yeah, it is a challenge because we've got such amazing assets, you know. And I was in Zanzibar a while back, and you start to see these like big hotels being built because they are connected to Europe by an airport that works, you know. So all of a sudden you start getting these jet loads of people coming to lie on the beach. So there's a temptation to turn it into the coast of Spain, which would be a disaster. But I think people are conscious of that. I think we're very conscious of how people respond to us. We for instance, got a lot of Russian clients recently who you know, haven't been coming to South Africa. But because their options have been a bit limited recently, they have been, and they're coming back and back and back because they've never experienced a place like this, you know. People, landscapes, it's just unbelievable.
Yeah, especially Cape Town is a mind-blowing place.
So,
moving on. With your collaborations with Aman, then the Six Senses and Oka, especially on the custom furniture side of it, what's been the most surprising outcome from these collaborations, and how do they push the boundaries of integrated design?
So that idea of integrated design, that's something that happened with us very early on in the mid-90s, actually, where we realized very early on that we design a building and then an interior designer would take it over, and that would be the end of your vision for that building. And then the interior designer would put furniture in that was terrible, so it was even worse. So we started ARC, which is an interior design company, and then we started Oka, which does furniture. So we've got this kind of vertical supply mechanism where we can integrate everything. Because I think we also realized that one of the problems that architects have is they architects at some point convinced themselves that they were responsible for designing the fabric of the building, and lost sight of the fact that what they were doing was actually designing an experience for somebody. You know, the whole thing comes together. It's the combination of interiors, lighting, landscaping that makes for a successful project. So being able to integrate all of these things was very important for us. So that was a key moment in our journey, building those three pillars.
So it's SAOTA, ARC, and
Oka.
Oka.
Yeah, and I think that continues today in many projects we do. You know, we don't always get the interior. So on Six Senses, for instance, we haven't got the interior. But we have worked quite closely together with the interior designers. But when it all comes together, it's really exciting.
A few questions on the challenges and industry insights. So architecture industry is clearly competitive globally. Now, what's one underrated challenge SAOTA has overcome in expanding to, I think you are in all the 6 continents at the moment.
Yeah.
And what lessons would you share with emerging firms?
I think it comes back to that idea of embracing technology. So we were lucky that we were in Cape Town, because Cape Town is an extraordinary city, and a lot of people came into Cape Town from all over the world, and that really gave us these relationships to other people who lived outside of Cape Town. I think also we realized early on that if we were going to get any scale, which we needed because Cape Town's a small town, we had to be working out of Cape Town. And I think we also realized early on that there were fantastic opportunities in places that many other people didn't even know existed, whether it was in Africa or in Asia. And I think we actively sought those out. The big and we did a lot of remote work early on, but it was with things like Skype, and those platforms didn't really work particularly well sometimes. But when COVID hit, there was a day that we decided to leave the office, and 2 days later we had a couple of hundred people sitting at home on BIM 360. So all kind of 2 days later, they're all working in the cloud, because we had servers at the office. So we went onto the cloud. And Teams was just fantastic. There was this technology where, so we also took a difficult decision to pivot away from working with folders on our servers to working with Teams. So we don't just use Teams for communication. We actually have all of our information sitting in Teams. So, and of course, COVID forced the world to it forced everyone to change their behavior, right? We could never have done that without COVID. But it gave us a base, a digital base to work from. So when the lockdowns ended, we didn't go back to the office because we didn't need to. And in fact, one of the things that happened is there are about 50 or 60 people now who don't even live in Cape Town anymore. It's allowed people to move and do their own things. So we've had to kind of build new digital social environments. Like I was explaining to somebody, we've got a yoga club and a camera club and all sorts of things that do tie people back together socially. You don't get it all back, but the benefits outweigh the losses. So we've one of my pieces of advice, and this is advice I give to young South Africans who live in a country that's quite isolated geographically and, of course, historically with apartheid. We were literally disconnected from the world for 50 years, is that there are big markets out there, and if you've got something that you're good at, because I think if in this world of things like AI emerging, you have to be good at what you do. Otherwise, you're not going to have space to compete. But if you've got something to offer, try and get out in front of a bigger audience, because that's really where the magic is, right?
With climate change reshaping the landscapes, how is SAOTA rethinking resilience in designs, especially in vulnerable areas like the coastal projects in Dubai or the US?
I think as I said earlier, we are very interested in passive strategies around energy. We've become a lot more interested in appropriate landscaping, because one of the ways to mitigate impact of climate is to create microclimates using local plants, which then attract local fauna back in, insects, animals, etc. And more recently, we've built a materials research unit as well. So we're becoming a lot more conscious about procurement and materials. But it's difficult, One of the architecture and construction still consumes almost most of the energy on the planet.
Yes, it does.
It's still the biggest polluter.
Yes.
We try and build buildings that are permanent, that aren't going anywhere for a long time, because that's one way of locking carbon and getting away from a kind of a throwaway society.
Because polluters for sure, 38%.
Yeah.
So including all the newer buildings that are coming up, the whole activity, as well as the existing ones, we contribute 38%.
Yeah. But a lot of it's also policy, One of the, I think people who aren't architects often look at architects and they say, oh, you guys can change the world. And sure, we can make small contributions, but we're beholden to buildings are expensive. Architects aren't the richest fraternity on the planet by any means. Architects don't wield power. Architects are reliant on clients, on patrons, on people who have resources to commission them to do things. A lot of this is also just around, we've got issues in South Africa around housing. We are post-apartheid, millions of houses were built. And not a single architect was consulted. It was engineers and quantity surveyors. And the product's terrible. And, millions of people are pretty much locked into poverty because the wrong solution has been created for them. So we need better policy. I say to young architects, if you want to change the world, pick up a pen and go and write legislation. Don't design buildings. They're not going to change the world. Nobody employs architects. Less than 1% of buildings are architect designed.
You mean statistically worldwide, or are you referring to Africa?
Everywhere. People build a lot of buildings, and most of those buildings aren't architect designed. They might be designed by people who have experience in solving a practical problem. It's a big challenge, this, and it needs better politicians, better policies, because that's where you can make a big change. So we're trying to work in different ways to mitigate the impact of the buildings that we design on the environment, but it's a very small part of the puzzle.
But do you feel for the climate change in the sense that something needs to be done about it?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Why?
You only have to fly over we work all over the place, so we travel a lot, and you fly over the planet and it looks like it's infested with some kind of a fungus, everywhere you look. Nothing's not touched anymore. And it just looks wrong. And it's accelerated so much. In Africa, for instance, you go from a small population of a couple of 100 million 50 years ago, over 1 billion now, heading towards 4 billion. We're going to have these mega cities: Lagos, 100 million people; Kinshasa, 70 million people; Dar es Salaam, 70 million people; Lilongwe, Malawi, 30 million people; Lusaka, 30 million people. mega cities, where do those resources come from? Who's writing policies that are going to be resilient enough to protect Africa's environment from 4 billion people? We're one of the last kind of big heat sinks on the planet. So there are massive things coming, massive problems. And this populism doesn't help that's out there, countries looking after their own affairs before looking after anyone else's. It's a difficult point in time, for sure.
Luxury design often faces criticism for excess. Now, how does SAOTA counter this? By infusing meaning and functionality into high-end projects like Coral Vista, a La Pan house?
It's a good question. And again, there aren't easy answers because it obviously is excessive on one hand. But rich people have always existed and wealth has always existed. And a lot of culture comes out of that space, A lot of extraordinary historical architecture is, you could call excessive. So I think what these buildings let us do, on one hand, for an African country, it's been an amazing platform for us to build and retain skills. Another one of the things I'm very proud of is that there are 400 South African kids sitting in Cape Town, competing at the highest levels, using some of the, with extraordinary skill levels. They're not sitting in Dubai. They're not sitting in London. They're sitting in Cape Town. And it's on the back of projects like this. So it's but again, maybe that's this issue of, you look after your part of the world and not everybody else's sometimes. I think we are trying to, as I say, be more responsible about the way resources are used. We're trying to be more conscious about systems and materials, and we're trying to build buildings that last. So hopefully these buildings are not torn down in 15 years' time, which is exactly what's happening around Dubai at the moment. That first set of houses that were built on places like the Palm, they are busy being torn down and rebuilt because it was the wrong building to start with.
Looking ahead to 2030 and beyond, what emerging trends like AI in design or biophilic architecture do you see transforming SAOTA's work, and how are you preparing for them?
I think there's an emerging. It's been around for a long time now, but it's more pronounced. This idea of how architecture, a building can enhance the quality of somebody's life. So ideas about wellness coming into buildings. I think also this idea of biophilic in the sense of being integrated with a landscape or integrated with an ecosystem. I think most people now in cities live lives where they're very disconnected from the natural world, and buildings can be designed to change that. Both in terms of being close to plants, but also being connected to things like the cycle of the moon and the sun. If you can see those things through a building, it's very powerful. It's a very powerful natural cycles. So we're seeing a lot of that. The impact of AI, as I said, is very murky. We at the moment for us, it's a very empowering thing. It allows you to function kind of on steroids, as it were, because you can just you can what's the word? You can put stuff together in a much quicker way, as long as you're careful with it. But the impact it has is I have no idea where that's going. There seem to be a lot of things coming together that might make the future a little bit murky. I think in Africa there are a lot of positives, though. There's there are a lot of bright, good things happening. I think for us the future, we don't have war clouds gathering over us, which parts of the world have. We don't have these aging populations. We don't have the culture wars that a lot of the rest of the world is having. So I think we're in a good place at the moment.
Also, so SAOTA is climbing the global rankings with World Architecture 100, and you are 73rd in 2025. Now, what's your vision for the firm's legacy, and how do you mentor the next generation of partners? Like some names I figured out is Danny Remers and Dominic George.
Yeah. We've got we call it a kind of conveyor belt model, where we've realized, time is time's an amazing thing. If you gain momentum and you use time, you can get far. You can do a lot step by step every day if you're going in the right direction. But time also moves you through something. So one of the things we've done at the firm is we've kind of developed this conveyor belt model where we're very conscious that if SAOTA is kind of an institution, we're moving through it, right? As you get older, you kind of at some point you exit it, and if you haven't got people stepping on the conveyor belt after you, then that thing will just kind of wither and die. So we've been very we've been very. SAOTA's been an amazing thing in our lives. We think it's impacted on lots of people around us. We think it's been a great thing for Cape Town and South Africa because it's a whole community of people that have built a life around it, which has been amazing. We pay tax. That tax builds schools and roads in South Africa, and that's all on fees that come from outside of South Africa. So we'd like that to continue. We'd like SAOTA to continue to do better and better work. We'd like it to be a platform for young South Africans, young Africans. And we've tried to design it so that, we move out of it and new people move into it.
If you could redesign one of the iconic structure from history using SAOTA's principles, what would it be and why? And what modern twist would you add?
This is the one question that I couldn't really figure out. I think actually, maybe I do have I've got a South African response. We built terrible cities because of bad policy. So coming back to somebody sitting down somewhere and writing policy about how you build a city. In South Africa, with our racial history and our economic theories and all of the nonsense that of the 20th century, we have cities that are very difficult to make livable or make equitable or fair. People are. The thing about a city is that if you design it badly, you lock people away from opportunity. So where I was talking about a building being a platform that should make your life better, a building in a city can also make your life worse and irrecoverable kind of thing. You can't fix it because the city gets in the way because you live 30 kilometers away from where you should live. So I'd redesign South African cities, make them more livable, try and undo some of the patterns that have been locked in.
Well, that's a very nice answer. What's the one thing you don't want in the African dynamic to change at all?
That's a good question. I think, just the African sensibility, the way people respect each other. That's an important thing. Yeah. People should hang on to that.
No, I would agree to that. I would definitely agree to that.
Yeah.
Well, Greg, it's it's been an interesting conversation.
Yeah.
Thank you for all the history and the insights and all of it. SAOTA is 38 now, considering it was formed in 1986. I wish and hope that at 50, perhaps, we both would be more aged than what we are.
Yeah.
And perhaps also include the others as well.
Yeah.
And have a conversation, a fun one, perhaps in Cape Town. Yeah, I would love that.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, I wish you guys the very best, especially in the region as well.
Thank you.
Like I told you off the camera, when there are many people who recognize SAOTA, and because we have an African connection, people reach out to me and my team to ask for introductions. So I wish you guys more success and more work, especially considering the philosophy and the idea behind the thoughts that you operate on.
Yeah.
So I wish you guys all the best, and thank you very much for being here.
Thank you. That was great.
Thank you, Greg.
Thanks.